caught my wife cheating with a random guy from work. She called it just sucks. I walked out and now. I never thought I'd be that guy, the one posting on Reddit about his wife cheating. But here I am, sitting in our empty living room, trying to make sense of everything. Let me start by giving you some background. My name's James and my wife is Lisa. We've been married for 7 years, and up until recently, I thought we had a solid relationship. Sure, like any couple, we had our ups and downs, but nothing that I thought was unfixable. The first sign that something was wrong came about 6 months ago. Lisa started acting different. She was more distant, always on her phone, and working late way more often than usual. At first, I brushed it off. We both have busy jobs. I'm in construction and she's in sales, so I figured it was just a stressful period. But then things started adding up in a way that I couldn't ignore. Lisa started dressing up more for work. I mean, she always looked good, but she was going all out, sexy dresses, makeup, the works. When I commented on it, she snapped saying, "I just want to feel good about myself, James." What's wrong with that? Nothing, of course, but it felt off. She wasn't dressing like that for me. There were also more girls' nights than usual, and she was always vague about where she was going and who she was with. Then there was the sex. Our sex life, which had always been pretty decent, dwindled to almost nothing. She was too tired, too stressed, too everything. I tried to be understanding, but when I initiated anything, she shut me down. That hurt. Still, I told myself it was just a rough patch. Boy, was I naive. The real turning point came one Saturday morning. Lisa was in the shower, and her phone, which she always guarded like Fort Knox, was left on the kitchen counter. I don't know what came over me, but something told me to check it. I'm not proud of it, but I did. I picked up her phone, and it unlocked without needing a password. She must have turned that off for convenience. My heart was pounding, and I almost chickened out, but curiosity, or maybe instinct, pushed me to open her messages. And there it was, a string of texts between Lisa and some guy named Brad. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through their conversation. It wasn't just friendly banter. It was flirty, explicit. She was talking about their last night together, saying she couldn't wait to see him again. I felt like I was going to be sick. Then I saw it, a photo she sent him. She was wearing this lingerie I'd never seen before, the kind of thing I'd only imagined in fantasies, and she'd never worn it for me. My hands were shaking, and my chest felt tight. I couldn't breathe. It all hit me at once. This wasn't just some work thing or harmless flirting. This was real. She was cheating on me, right there, behind my back, while I was working to build a future for us. I heard the shower stop, and I panicked. I put the phone back exactly where I found it and sat down at the kitchen table, trying to act normal. When Lisa came out of the shower, she was all smiles. She kissed me on the cheek, acting like everything was fine. I couldn't believe the nerve. My heart was still racing, and I knew I couldn't just sit there pretending nothing had happened. I needed to confront her, but I didn't want to explode right away. I wanted answers first. "Hey, who's Brad?" I asked, as casually as I could manage, though my voice was trembling just a bit. Her smile faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, he's just a guy from work. Why?" I looked her straight in the eyes, trying to keep calm, but I could feel the anger rising. "I saw some messages between you two. They didn't seem work-related." That's when her face went pale. She blinked a few times, like she was trying to figure out how to respond, but then she snapped. "What the hell, James? You went through my phone? That's an invasion of privacy." She didn't even deny it. Instead, she tried to flip it around like I was a bad guy. I couldn't believe it. "Are you kidding me, Lisa?" I shot back. "I wouldn't have had to if you weren't sneaking around behind my back." She crossed her arms, defensive. "You're overreacting. Brad and I are just friends. We flirt sometimes, but it's harmless. Everyone does it." Harmless? I saw the messages, Lisa. I saw the photo. Don't lie to me. How long has this been going on? She hesitated for just a moment, then rolled her eyes. Fine. It's been a few months, okay? But it's not a big deal. It's just sex, James. It doesn't mean anything. Just sex. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. My whole body felt numb. She said it so casually, like she wasn't ripping my heart out of my chest. Hearing her say, "It's just sex," like it was nothing, flipped a switch in me. I stood there, speechless, while she acted like this whole thing was no big deal. How could she throw away everything we built for some fling? I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I just stood there, feeling the weight of it all crush me. Just sex. I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper, "How can you say that? You're my wife." She sighed like I was overreacting, like I was being unreasonable. "James, I love you. But things have been boring, you know? I needed some excitement. Brad, he's exciting, but it doesn't change how I feel about you." Her words were like gasoline on a fire. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Excitement? I practically shouted. You needed excitement. So you decided to screw some guy behind my back? How long have you been lying to me? How long have you been making me feel like I'm the problem, when you've been sneaking off with him? She shrugged, which made me angrier. I didn't mean for you to find out. I didn't want to hurt you. Oh, well, that's comforting, I snapped. How thoughtful of you, Lisa. She rolled her eyes again, and I could feel myself losing control. Look, I didn't want things to get complicated, okay? I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. I couldn't take it anymore. You're unbelievable, I said, pacing back and forth. This isn't some accident, Lisa. You chose this. You made the decision to lie to me, to betray me. I don't even know who you are anymore. She looked at me, completely unfazed. I'm still the same person, James. You're just blowing this out of proportion. That was the last straw. The woman I thought I knew was gone, and now I had to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. After Lisa's cold response, I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. I couldn't think straight. My head was spinning, and I didn't know whether I wanted to scream or break down. The woman I'd loved for 7 years was standing in front of me, treating our marriage like it was disposable, like I didn't even matter. I stormed out of the kitchen and went to our bedroom. I just needed to get away from her, from the situation, from everything. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, trying to make sense of it all. But nothing made sense. How could she do this to me? To us? I thought we were building a life together, and now it felt like that life had been burned to the ground. My emotions hit me all at once. Anger, betrayal, sadness. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I just sat there numb as the weight of the betrayal settled in. All those nights, she said she was working late or out with friends. Had she been with him? How long had she been laughing at me behind my back? I kept replaying her words in my head. It's just sex. Like that was supposed to make me feel better. Like it somehow made her affair less of a betrayal. But it wasn't just sex. It was lies. It was breaking the trust we'd built over 7 years. It was throwing away our entire marriage for some excitement. The worst part was she didn't even seem to care. She didn't apologize. She didn't show any real remorse. It was like she was trying to convince me that I was overreacting, that her cheating was somehow normal, acceptable. But it wasn't. Not to me. And I couldn't wrap my head around how she could be so casual about it. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to figure out what to do next. Should I stay and try to fix things? Could I even forgive her? Did I want to? Or was this the end? Part of me wanted to leave right then and never look back. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, didn't know if I could walk away so easily. Eventually, I forced myself to get up. Sitting in that room wasn't going to solve anything. I walked back into the kitchen where Lisa was still standing, scrolling through her phone like she hadn't just blown up our life. The sight of her, so calm, so indifferent, made my blood boil again. We need to talk, I said, my voice shaky but firm. She looked up from her phone, barely paying attention. What's there to talk about, James? I told you the truth. Now, we just need to figure out how to move forward. Move forward? I couldn't believe she was already talking about moving forward like this was just some bump in the road. You cheated on me, Lisa. You've been lying to me for months, and now you want to talk about moving forward? Like nothing happened. She sighed, clearly frustrated. I already told you it didn't mean anything. You're the one making this bigger than it is. I clenched my fist to keep myself from screaming. It is big, Lisa. You broke our marriage. You betrayed me. How can you act like this is nothing? For the first time, her expression softened, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't regret or guilt. It was annoyance. James, we're adults. People have affairs all the time. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. Have you lost your mind? I couldn't hold back anymore. Do you even hear yourself right now? People don't just cheat because they're bored and then act like everything's fine afterward. This isn't normal. She just shook her head like I was some child throwing a tantrum. I never said it was normal, James. But it happened, okay? I can't undo it. Do you want to leave me over this? Is that what you're saying? I froze. Was that what I wanted? Part of me wanted to walk out the door and never look back, but there was still that voice in the back of my mind, the one that remembered the good times, the life we'd built. It was hard to just throw that away, even now. I don't know, I admitted, feeling defeated. I honestly don't know. She stared at me for a long moment, then finally put down her phone and sighed. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for things to get this far. I was just looking for something different. I still love you, James, but I can't take back what happened. It was the first time she'd said she was sorry, but it didn't feel real. There was no emotion behind it. No rimos, just words. And I didn't know if I could accept that. Her apology felt hollow, like she was saying it because it was what I needed to hear, not because she actually meant it. I stood there, staring at her, trying to figure out if I could forgive her for what she did. Could we really move past this? Could I ever trust her again? Do you even want to fix this? I asked, my voice quieter now, almost pleading. I needed to know if she even cared enough to try, or if this was all just another game to her. She shrugged. I don't know, James. I guess. I mean, I don't want a divorce, if that's what you're asking. I felt something inside me snap. The way she said it, like it was no big deal. Like she was debating whether or not she cared enough to save our marriage. And I was just sitting there, waiting for her to make up her mind. It was infuriating. You don't want a divorce? I repeated, anger creeping back into my voice. Do you even understand what you've done? You've completely destroyed everything. And now you're standing here acting like you don't even care. She rolled her eyes again, like this whole conversation was just a hassle for her. Look, I already said I was sorry. What more do you want from me? Do you want me to beg? Do you want me to cry? Because I'm not going to. That's when I knew there was no saving this. She didn't care not about me, not about our marriage. She was only sorry that she got caught, not for what she'd done. She didn't want to fix things because deep down, she didn't think she'd done anything wrong. I don't think I can do this, I said, more to myself than to her. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was nothing more than an afterthought, where my feelings didn't matter, where my wife saw betrayal as just another part of life. She crossed her arms and leaned against the counter, waiting for me to say something else. But I was done. There was nothing left to say. After that, the silence between us felt heavier than anything we'd ever faced. I stood there, staring at her, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. The woman I married, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, was gone. In her place was someone who didn't care about the pain she'd caused, someone who wasn't willing to fight for us. I realized I'd been fighting alone. I'm leaving, I finally said, my voice steadier than I expected. Lisa blinked, surprised. What? You're just going to walk out? I nodded. I need space. I can't be here right now. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't say anything, really. Just stood there, arms crossed, watching as I turned and grabbed my keys. I couldn't believe how little this seemed to affect her. It was like she'd already made peace with it, like she'd been ready for this moment long before I had. As I walked out the door, my heart was pounding. Part of me wanted her to chase after me, to beg me to stay, to show some sign that she cared. But she didn't. The door clicked shut behind me, and with that, everything felt final. I got into my car and just sat there for a minute, staring at the steering wheel. My hands were trembling, and the reality of what had just happened started to sink in. I was leaving. I didn't know if it was permanent, if this was the end of our marriage, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer. Not with her. I drove for a while, aimlessly, not really knowing where I was going. My mind was racing, and I felt like I was on the verge of breaking down. How had we ended up here? How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Just a few days ago, I thought we were happy, or at least trying. Now, everything felt like a lie. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a small motel on the edge of town. It was a cheap, run-down place, but it didn't matter. I just needed somewhere to crash, somewhere I could be alone and figure out what the hell I was going to do next. I checked in, got my key, and collapsed onto the bed in the dingy little room. The weight of the day hit me all at once, and I finally let myself cry. Lying there in that cheap motel room, the floodgates finally opened. I cried harder than I had in years, maybe ever. It wasn't just sadness. It was anger, frustration, confusion, betrayal. All of it came crashing down on me at once. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The realization that my marriage was falling apart, that the woman I loved had betrayed me, was too much to bear. I kept replaying everything in my head. The lies, the cheating, her cold indifference when I confronted her. How had I missed the signs? How had I let things get so bad without even realizing it? Was I that blind, or did I just not want to see it? Part of me hated her for what she'd done, hated her for throwing away everything we had for some guy who didn't mean anything to her. But another part of me hated myself for trusting her, for loving her so much that I couldn't see the truth even when it was right in front of me. I thought about all the moments that now seemed like lies. The night she was working late, the time she brushed me off when I asked what was wrong, the way she'd been so distant lately. I felt like a fool for not piecing it together sooner. But even then, even knowing what she'd done, there was still a part of me that wanted to fix things, to go back to the way things were before. That thought made me cry even harder. How could I still want her after everything? How could I even think about trying to repair something that was so clearly broken? I lay there for hours, unable to sleep, my mind spinning in circles. I thought about calling a friend, but I couldn't bring myself to explain everything. The idea of saying it out loud, "My wife is cheating on me," felt too raw, too painful. So I just stayed in that dark, quiet room, alone with my thoughts, feeling more lost than I ever had in my life. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, as I lay staring at the cracked ceiling of that motel room, something shifted inside me. The raw pain started to ease, just a little, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was just a clarity that comes after a breakdown, but I finally started to think clearly. Lisa had made her choice. She chose Brad, or maybe she just chose herself. Either way, she had thrown our marriage aside without a second thought, and I couldn't keep holding on to something she had already let go of. I had spent the entire night replaying our relationship in my mind, going over every moment, every fight, every good memory, and I realized that I had been holding on to the idea of what we used to be, not who we were now. Lisa wasn't the woman I married anymore, and maybe I wasn't the same man either. We had grown apart, and I hadn't wanted to admit it. But now, I had to face the truth. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I couldn't keep hoping that Lisa would suddenly realize how much she'd hurt me and beg for forgiveness. She didn't care enough to fight for us, So why should I? I didn't deserve this. I didn't deserve to be treated like an afterthought, like my feelings didn't matter. I had spent years trying to build a life with Lisa, only for her to betray me in the worst way possible. And as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, waiting for her to wake up and realize what she'd done. For the first time since I found out about the affair, I felt a sense of resolve. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to stay in a marriage where I was the only one trying. I wasn't going to keep fighting for someone who didn't care enough to fight for me. It was time to move on. It was time to take control of my life and start figuring out what came next without Lisa. The next morning, I woke up feeling clearer than I had in days. The pain was still there, of course, but something had changed. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I had to take the first steps toward moving on, even if it felt impossible. I checked out of the motel and headed to my car, knowing what I had to do next. I needed to talk to someone to get it all off my chest. So I drove to my brother's house. He'd always been the one I turned to when things went south, and I knew he'd have my back no matter what. When I knocked on his door, I wasn't sure how to even start. But as soon as he opened it and saw the look on my face, he knew something was wrong. "James, what's going on, man?" I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Lisa's been cheating on me," I said, my voice breaking. His expression shifted from concern to shock, and then to anger. "Are you serious? That bitch." I knew something was off with her. He pulled me inside and sat me down in the living room, handing me a beer. "Tell me everything." And so I did. I told him about the text, the confrontation, the way Lisa acted like it didn't even matter. It all came pouring out, and for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel like I had to hide what was happening. I was hurt, and I was angry. But talking to my brother made me realize that I wasn't alone in this. I had people who cared about me, who would help me through it. He listened patiently, shaking his head every time I recounted Lisa's cold indifference. When I was done, he leaned forward, his face serious. "You can't stay with her, man. She doesn't respect you. Hell, she doesn't even seem to love you anymore." "I know," I said, finally admitting it out loud. "I think it's over." He nodded, putting a hand on my shoulder. "Then it's time to do what's best for you. You've always put her first, James. It's time to look out for yourself now." Hearing him say that felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I didn't have to keep pretending everything could be fixed. I didn't have to stay in a marriage that was already broken beyond repair. It was okay to let go. Leaving my brother's house that afternoon, I felt more certain about what needed to happen next. I had to end things with Lisa. It was terrifying, but it was the only way I could start to heal and rebuild my life. The more I thought about it, the more I realized staying with her would only keep me trapped in this endless cycle of pain and betrayal. The drive back to our house felt different this time. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a place where I'd been lied to, where my marriage had crumbled. I pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a few minutes, gathering myself. I knew this conversation was going to be rough, but it had to happen. When I walked inside, Lisa was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had changed. I stood in the doorway for a moment, wondering how she could be so unaffected by all of this, how she could act like everything was fine. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. She looked up, annoyed. "What now, James? We've already been over this." "I'm done," I said simply. "I'm done with the lies, the excuses, all of it. This isn't going to work anymore. I want a divorce." For the first time since I found out about the affair, her face actually registered some shock. "A divorce? Are you serious?" I nodded. "Yeah, I can't do this anymore. You don't respect me, and you don't care about fixing what's broken between us. You've already made your choice." She looked angry, but underneath that, I thought I saw a flicker of panic. "So you're just going to walk away from our marriage? Over one mistake. One mistake." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. This wasn't a mistake, Lisa. This was months of lying, cheating, and pretending everything was fine. You didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice over and over again. And now I'm making mine. She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't want to hear it. I was beyond listening to more excuses or attempts to shift the blame. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow, I said. I'll get my things and figure out the rest later. For the first time, I saw the reality hit her. She wasn't in control anymore. I was. James, wait. Can't we talk about this? We don't have to rush into anything. I shook my head. We're past talking, Lisa. I can't trust you, and without trust, there's nothing left. She fell silent, and I could tell she knew I wasn't going to change my mind. There was no going back from this. I turned and walked away, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. It was painful, but it was also freeing. I had made my decision, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had control over my life again. The days after that conversation were some of the hardest I'd ever experienced, but they were also the most freeing. I started looking for apartments, going through the motions of packing up my life, deciding what to take with me and what to leave behind. Each box I packed felt like another step away from the wreckage of my marriage. Lisa tried to talk to me a few times, but the conversations were always the same. She'd go from being defensive, blaming me for not being exciting enough, to pleading for another chance, saying she could change. But I didn't believe her anymore. There was no fixing what she'd broken, no going back to the way things were. I had given her everything, and she threw it away like it didn't matter. I remember one night, about a week after I told her I wanted a divorce, she came into the bedroom where I was packing. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching me in silence for a while before speaking. James, do you really think this is what's best? I mean, we've been through so much together. I didn't stop packing, didn't look at her. I think this is the only thing that's best now, Lisa. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. She sighed, and I could hear the frustration in her voice. I said I was sorry. What more do you want from me? I finally turned to face her, exhausted by the same conversation over and over. I want you to understand what you did. I want you to realize that it's not just about the affair. It's about the lying, the disrespect, and the fact that you didn't care enough to fight for us. I needed you to want to fix this, and you didn't. She looked at me, and for a second, I thought maybe she got it. But then she shook her head. You're throwing this all away, James, over something that didn't even mean anything. That's exactly the problem, Lisa, I said. It didn't mean anything to you, but it meant everything to me. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, I focused on getting out. I found a small apartment a few towns over, nothing fancy, but it was mine. The day I moved out, I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. I was done living in a house filled with lies and betrayal. It was time to start over, even if starting over meant being alone for a while. Packing the last of my things, I looked around the house one last time. The memories, both good and bad, flooded my mind, but I didn't let them overwhelm me. I closed the door behind me and walked away, ready to face whatever was next. Moving into my new apartment felt strange. It was the first time in years that I'd been completely on my own. No more coming home to Lisa. No more pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. It was just me, a few boxes, and a lot of time to think. The first few days were quiet. Too quiet, honestly. I had spent so long being caught up in the chaos of my marriage, falling apart that, now that it was over, the silence was deafening. I kept expecting to hear Lisa's voice, to see her walking through the door, but there was nothing, just me. At first, it was hard. The pain of what she did still lingered, especially in those moments when I had nothing to distract myself. I found myself replaying our last conversation, thinking about all the times she had lied to my face, all the signs I missed. But the more time I spent alone, the more I realized something important. I was free. Free from the lies, free from the constant tension in our house, free from wondering what she was doing behind my back. I didn't have to live with the doubt anymore. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to question whether or not I was enough. Because now, I knew the problem wasn't me. It was her. There were still tough moments, of course. The nights were the hardest. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened. The memories would creep back in, and sometimes I'd wonder if I'd made the right choice. But then I'd remember the look on her face when I confronted her, the way she brushed it off like it didn't matter, and I knew I had done what I had to. I was rebuilding piece by piece. It wasn't easy, but I was starting to feel something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. I wasn't there yet, not by a long shot, but I was on my way. It's been a few months since I left Lisa, and the pain doesn't cut as deep as it used to. Sure, there are still moments when the memories hit me, sometimes out of nowhere, but they don't control me anymore. I've learned to let them pass, to accept that what's done is done, and to focus on where I'm going next. One of the hardest lessons I've learned through all this is that not every relationship can be saved. I spent so much time trying to figure out what went wrong, wondering if I could have done something differently, but in the end, I realized that no amount of effort on my part could have fixed a relationship where only one of us was fighting. And that's okay. It doesn't make me weak. It just makes me human. In a strange way, I feel stronger now than I ever did before. I know what I deserve, and I won't settle for anything less. I've been reconnecting with old friends, focusing on my work, and even picking up a few hobbies I'd let slip during the chaos of my marriage. I've been rebuilding my life, piece by piece, and I'm proud of how far I've come. I haven't spoken to Lisa since I left. There's nothing left to say. The divorce is moving forward, and while part of me thought I'd feel some sort of closure when it's finalized, I already feel like I've closed that chapter. It's over, and I'm ready to leave it behind. If I could offer any advice to others going through something similar, it would be this: trust yourself. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Don't make excuses for their behavior, and don't let them make you feel like you're asking too much by wanting honesty and respect. You deserve to be with someone who values you and treats you with the same love and care you give them. Looking back, I'm not sure what the future holds for me, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. I'm moving forward, and that's what matters.